need to know this. Just a few minutes ago, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco, well, actually, they're continuing to hear the oral arguments at this moment in the main case against Donald Trump's Muslim ban. The hearing was held over telephone and comes just days after a federal judge named James Robart out in Seattle blocked that ban. On one side of today's oral arguments were the attorneys general of Minnesota and Washington State. They asked the Ninth Circuit to uphold Judge Robart's stay. On the other side of things were lawyers from Donald Trump's Justice Department who asked the Ninth Circuit to immediately reinstate the ban. They claim national security reasons, even though 0 Syrian refugees here in the U.S. have ever been involved in anything remotely like terrorism. And residents of the 7 other countries also affected by the travel portion of the ban have killed, you guessed it, 0 Americans in terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. A lot is at stake here, and not just for the hundreds of thousands of people personally affected by that ban. If the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upholds the lower court ruling that blocked Trump's ban, that could go a long way towards improving our image abroad, which has taken a huge hit since Donald Trump took over the Oval Office, as anyone with a Der Spiegel subscription already knows. But anyway, even if we do start looking better in the eyes of many Europeans, the damage Trump has done with this travel ban to our already tense relationship with Iran might be harder to undo. The Iranian government has responded to the ban by refusing to issue visas to Americans. And earlier today, Iran's supreme leader said in a nationally televised speech that Trump and his ban represent the true America.
We would always speak about the political, economic, moral, and social corruption in the U.S. administration. This man revealed it during the election campaign and since then. His actions now have demonstrated the reality of America and the meaning of American human rights.
To make matters worse, all of this comes in the middle of the most serious diplomatic standoff between the U.S. and Iran in years. The Trump administration has just slapped Iran with a brand new set of sanctions and is reportedly now about to pick ultra-Iran hawk and former Reagan official Elliot Abrams as the next Deputy Secretary of State. The president himself has also raged against Iran on Twitter, warning that he won't be as kind to Iran as President Obama was. Apparently, Donald Trump doesn't remember that President Obama, like George W. Bush, threatened to go to war with Iran if nuclear negotiations didn't work out. This all, of course, raises a very big question. Is Donald Trump preparing for a war with Iran? And if so, how can we stop him? Joining now is Jamal Abdi, Policy Director at the National Iranian American Council and Executive Director of NIAC Action. Jamal Abdi, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me back.
Great to have you with us. First of all, what are you hearing from Iranian Americans and others affected by this travel ban?
Well, first, a huge sigh of relief from what happened on Friday, a sort of an unexpected reprieve from some of the confusion. Unfortunately, a lot of the people that were caught up in the ban are still confused about what they can actually do. I know of people who were supposed to pick up visas. They, went to the country to pick up the visa because you can't get them inside of Iran, so they travel abroad at sometimes great cost. And they don't know, okay, should I go back to the country and pick up my visa? It's still a mess. It's still chaotic, and there's still no certainty as to how long this suspension will actually last. So while I think people are happy that there's at least, a slight pause here, I think that the sentiment still remains that we are in an upside-down world right now.
I noticed today several reports that there were a number of lawsuits filed around the country. I don't know if they were habeas corpus cases or that was just the essence of them, but they were basically saying, produce the people that you are detaining. In other words, suggesting that the administration is still, as a result of the extreme vetting perhaps, detaining some people and not allowing them through or holding them back. Do you know anything about this?
I don't, I'm not aware of any of these cases, but I continue to hear these horror stories. And again, so I don't know if anybody is still detained. I know of people who have their U.S. citizens who have had their phones taken from them and basically all the information extracted. The agents demanded the PIN numbers, and then all the information is extracted from the phone, and people are not sure, okay, has my phone been compromised? And in this case, it was a NASA scientist who had, encrypted or supposedly encrypted materials on this phone. So I think even for U.S. citizens, when we're flying, of Iranian descent, are starting to be a little bit worried. What are my rights at the airport?
Was this guy a naturalized citizen, or was he born in the United States?
I'm not sure whether I'm not sure. I know that he is a U.S. citizen now.
Yeah, that's astonishing.
Yeah.
The Ninth Circuit is hearing this case right now. They could either say, okay, we're upholding the ban. They could say we're throwing out the ban, or they could do something in the middle and say, well, green cards yes, visas no, or something. Visas yes, refugees no. What's your sense? What are you thinking and hearing about how this might come out?
I don't have any crystal ball. The hope is obviously that the restraining order remains in place, that it gets kicked back down. But we're all listening to the oral arguments. We're all trying to parse what they're going to decide here. The other fact is there are many other legal challenges. So, what we're really seeing is this line of defense against what Trump is trying to do. In this case, we see the states and the judiciary. We obviously see civil society coming out, but then we have all these other affected individuals who have their own standing and who are filing their own lawsuits. So, regardless of what happens tonight, I think that this is going to be tied up for some time. And the question is, are people going to have some reprieve to be able to come into the country? Will there potentially be another restraining order or injunction, depending on how the Ninth Circuit rules? Yeah. Definitely to be continued, though.
The sanctions that were just slapped on Iran.
Yeah.
The Trump administration is asserting that they're doing this because the missile test that Iran did last week or the week before last was illegal, or implying it was a violation of the Iran deal at the very least, or some sort of violation of international law. I've not seen any documentation of that. Do you know if this actually was it a violation of international law? Was it a violation of the agreement? The Iranians are suggesting, that it wasn't, that they had every right to test a missile under the agreement.
Yeah. Regardless of where you stand on how to deal with Iran or the nuclear deal, is it good or bad, the missile tests are not a violation of UN Security Council resolutions of the Iran deal. As part of the Iran deal, there is language. The states call upon Iran to refrain from testing missiles that are designed to carry nuclear weapons. Now, that's pretty specific language, that this is not binding. This is calls upon. And even the Trump people, the experts in the administration, they're very careful about how they describe this. Now, this might not be Sean Spicer, but the people who are doing background briefings, they're saying that what Iran is doing is in defiance of UN Security Council resolutions, but not a violation. And that's where the nuance sort of comes into play, where there are many in the U.S. who want to curb Iran's tests and view these as provocative. But if we're talking about sort of the letter of the law, the letter of the UN Security Council resolutions, Iran is technically not in violation.
So there's a difference between provocative and illegal, or maybe it's not even provocative. I suppose it depends on your point of view. In some ways, this is reminding me of 2003. We've got a bunch of right-wing war hawks. George W. Bush, the axis of evil, Iran, North Korea, Iraq, and that led right straight to a war with Iraq.
Yeah.
The rhetoric is shockingly similar in many regards.
Yeah.
And then you had Sean Spicer come out, and when referencing Houthi rebels attacking a Saudi ship, said that essentially Iran had attacked an American ship, and he had to be corrected by a reporter in the room. Is this the ginning up of a war? Do you have any sense? What are your thoughts on that?
It's 2 weeks. Is it 2 weeks now into this administration? We already have our axis of evil moment.
Third week, I think.
Third week, but it was last week. We're putting Iran on notice.
Yeah.
Extremely, you talk about provocations. I mean, that's provocative language. It's uncertain what that means. But Michael Flynn, the National Security Advisor, came out to deliver that message. Clearly, something is going on behind the scenes. And I think, I know of people who voted for Donald Trump who said this guy doesn't want a war. He's an isolationist. He's criticized the Iraq war. But you really look at the people he has surrounded himself with. You've got Flynn, who has said some very off-the-wall things about how to deal with Iran and seems clearly to have a vendetta and is driven by this desire to confront Iran. Yeah. And then you have, the people that, like General Mattis at the Defense Department, who is respected and sort of viewed as a rational actor among all of these other maybe less rational actors. And even he is a big-time Iran hawk. He has actually a very personal animus towards Iran, given his experience inside of Iraq. So you read the tea leaves here, and even if perhaps Donald Trump or some of the people around him are not hoping to get into a war, you have people who have made their careers around confronting Iran, and there's no clear off-ramp from this. There doesn't seem to be any way to extricate ourselves from this confrontation. You compare this to Obama, the sanctions that Trump put into place are really, it's just a continuation of what Obama would do. Every few months, they would find a few other entities and slap sanctions on them for the ballistic missile tests. So this is really a continuation of that. The exception, though, is that with Obama, you actually had John Kerry talking to Javad Zarif. You actually had these channels of communication so that even if there was an escalation, you could ventilate some of that by actually talking to the other side. We don't have that right now.
That's troubling and concerning. Jamal Abdi, great having you with us.
Thank you
so much for dropping by.